When I decided to share this, I wasn't sure if it would do me any good or anyone else for that matter. But as I sit here now, overlooking the canyons that have become my sanctuary, I think maybe my story could serve as a lesson or, at least, a cautionary tale. It's been years since the implosion, and I've moved on in many ways. But the scars of that deception? They linger. Not as fresh as they once were, but enough to remind me that trust is fragile and love can sometimes be a beautifully crafted lie. It all began back in February 2018, a month that feels permanently etched into my memory. My wife and I had been married for 3.5 years at that point. Let me tell you, we weren't perfect, but I thought we were pretty damn close. I worked as an architect, a job that kept me on the move quite a bit, though it also gave me the flexibility to work from home when I wasn't traveling. My wife, Clara, had a high-powered corporate job. Lucrative, demanding, and as I would come to find out, the perfect cover for her duplicity. Looking back, it's almost laughable how blind I was. But isn't that how it always goes? You don't see the structural flaws until the whole thing comes crashing down. 5 years ago, we met at a friend's barbecue. She was stunning, articulate, confident, the kind of woman who made you sit up and take notice. I wasn't exactly polished myself, more of a rough-around-the-edges type, but somehow she saw something in me. In me? I thought I'd hit the jackpot. We were smitten from the start, the kind of romance that burns fast and bright. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Those early days were electric, meeting at each other's apartments where the clothes barely stayed on long enough for us to speak. 18 months later, we were married and moved into a spacious apartment, saving for our dream home. For a while, it felt like I was living someone else's life, someone luckier, someone who'd wanted love. But then, as they say, life happened. Somewhere between the promotions, the travel, and the endless grind, things began to change. Subtly, at first. A missed kiss here, a curt reply there. Clara started working longer hours. She claimed it was the price of climbing the corporate ladder. I understood, or at least I tried to. After all, I was traveling for work, too. But there's a difference between absence and distance, and we were rapidly becoming strangers under the same roof. Even then, I held on. I told myself it was a rough patch. Every marriage has them, right? We'd bounce back. What I didn't realize was that Clara had already checked out. I see it so clearly now, but back then, I was just a man clinging to a blueprint of a life that was never going to be built. You might think the discovery was the worst part, but honestly, the realization that everything we constructed was a lie, that hit harder. It wasn't just about losing Clara. It was about losing the life we'd planned, the future we'd envisioned together. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my foundation. So here I am, years later, writing this not to wallow in the pain or paint myself as some kind of victim. No, I'm here to tell you that life moves on. It's messy, it's painful, but it moves forward. And sometimes, when you least expect it, you find yourself in the quiet of nature, breathing fresh air and realizing that maybe, just maybe, you're better off for it. Does that sound dramatic? Probably. But that's what betrayal does. It turns your life into a cliché you're starring in. All I know is that my story didn't end the day I found out about Clara's affair. If anything, it was just the beginning. And if my rambling can help someone else out there, then it's worth putting it all down. Let me tell you how it all unraveled. You know, looking back, the signs were all there. Little things that, at the time, I dismissed as normal or chalked up to stress. But hindsight? Hindsight is brutal. It shows you just how much you ignored, how many red flags you waved away because you didn't want to believe the worst. It all started sometime in late 2017. Clara's hours at work became longer, much longer. She'd always worked hard, but now it seemed like she was permanently glued to her office chair or off at work functions most evenings. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd just been promoted, and she told me that putting in extra effort was part of the deal. Paying your dues, she called it. And I wanted to be supportive. Hell, I was proud of her. My wife was moving up in the world, and I figured we'd reap the benefits together. But then came the mood swings. Clara started snapping over the smallest things. Like, I'd ask if she wanted me to pick up dinner, and she'd act like I'd accused her of a crime. Or I'd mention her late nights, and suddenly I was being controlling or not understanding her career. She had a way of turning every question into an argument. It was exhausting. I thought maybe it was just the pressure of her new position, so I let it slide. Again, what really sticks with me, though, is how distant she became. We'd always had a solid physical connection, One of the cornerstones of our relationship, really. But over the months, it just faded. She was tired all the time, too busy, or not in the mood. At first, I tried to be patient. I mean, everyone goes through phases, right? But rejection after rejection, it wears on you, makes you question your worth. I started wondering if I wasn't attractive enough anymore, or if I'd done something to turn her off. I even thought about changing my workout routine, trying to look younger. I didn't want to admit that something deeper might be wrong. And then there was the burner phone. That damn phone. I can still see it in my mind, tucked away in the side pocket of her gym bag like it was mocking me. It wasn't her work phone or her personal one. It was a sleek, unfamiliar model. I only found it because I was looking for her car keys. My stomach dropped when I saw it. That moment was like a tiny earthquake in my chest. Something shifted, and I couldn't unfeel it. I didn't say anything, though. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Clara, why do you have a secret phone? Are you cheating on me? No, I wasn't ready to go there yet. So, I kept quiet, hoping I was wrong, that it was nothing. Maybe it was for a side project she hadn't told me about. That's what I told myself. But deep down, a little voice kept whispering, something's not right. From then on, everything she did seemed suspicious. Every late night at the office, every text she got while we were watching TV, every time she laughed at her phone, it all felt like proof that something was happening. I didn't have any real evidence, just gut feelings and that stupid phone. But it was enough to start eating away at me. I tried to fix things. That's the part that kills me the most. I really tried. One Friday, I went all out, cooked her favorite meal, set the table with candles, bought flowers, the whole 9 yards. I wanted to remind her of what we had, to show her I still cared. But when she came home, she barely looked at the table before telling me she had to meet her coworkers at a bar. Just like that, she brushed me off. I remember standing there in the kitchen, watching her get ready, looking more stunning than I'd seen her in weeks. It was like she was dressing up for someone else. I should have said something. I should have stopped her, demanded an explanation. But instead, I told her to go. She didn't even notice the anger in my voice. She just left, like it was any other night. That was the moment I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was going on. I didn't have all the pieces yet, but I was determined to find out. And once I started looking, I realized just how much I'd missed. I'll never forget the night it all came crashing down. It's like there's this line in your life, before and after, and that night was the sharp edge that split my world in two. Up until that point, I'd been clinging to the hope that I was just being paranoid, that Clara's behavior had some innocent explanation. But the truth? The truth came at me like a freight train, and there was no dodging it. It started with a plan. I'd had enough of feeling like a fool in my own marriage, enough of the late nights and the excuses that didn't add up. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. That Friday, while Clara was in the shower, I managed to get into her secret phone. The password was her mother's birthday. I installed a tracking app, telling myself it wasn't spying, it was just confirming. Deep down, I already knew. When she came out of the bathroom, looking every bit as gorgeous as she had the night before, I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. She breezed past me like nothing was wrong, like we hadn't been drifting further apart every day. I'll see you later, she said, and just like that, she was gone. I waited until her car was a safe distance away before pulling out my phone to track her location. My heart was pounding as I watched the little dot move across the map, heading toward the part of town she always claimed was for work outings. It stopped at a bar, no surprise there. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more. So, I drove to the bar and parked across the street, my eyes scanning the entrance like a detective in a bad crime drama. An hour passed before I saw her come out. She wasn't alone. A man followed her, tall and well-dressed, the kind of guy you'd imagine in a corner office. They were laughing, leaning into each other in a way that made my stomach churn. And then he kissed her. Right there, under the glow of a neon sign, he kissed my wife. I can't even describe what I felt in that moment. Anger, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But more than anything, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left me standing there as a shell of myself. I wanted to scream, to storm over there and confront them, but I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. They got into his car, and I followed. I told myself I was just trying to confirm what I already knew, but really, I think I wanted to see just how far she was willing to go. They drove to a hotel 10 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity. When they got out, still holding hands, I sat in my car, watching as they walked into the lobby together. That was it. There was no coming back from this. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the hotel entrance like it might somehow offer me answers. Eventually, I started driving. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. I just needed to get away, to put distance between myself and the wreckage of my life. My mind was a storm of thoughts. Anger at Clara, at myself for not seeing it sooner, at the man who had taken what wasn't his to take. I ended up at a small tavern on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where nobody asks questions, and I needed that. I ordered a drink, something strong, and sat there, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. The bartender, a kind woman with a sharp eye, asked if I was okay. "You look like someone knocked the wind out of you," she said. She wasn't wrong. As I sat there nursing my drink, a man named Ben struck up a conversation. At first, I didn't want to talk, but there was something about him, his calm demeanor, his understanding eyes, that made me open up. I told him everything, from the hidden phone to the hotel. He listened without judgment, nodding as if he'd been there himself. And then he said something that stuck with me. "You've got a choice, buddy. You can let this ruin you, or you can use it to rebuild. But staying in the wreckage? That's no life at all." It was a simple statement, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. He was right. I couldn't stay in the mess Clara had made. I needed to move forward, to find a way to reclaim my life. Ben mentioned that he had a trailer on his property, a quiet spot up in the canyons where I could clear my head. "It isn't much," he said, "but it's a start." That night, as I drove back to the apartment I no longer thought of as home, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Clara, demand answers, or beg for her to choose me. She'd already made her choice. Now, it was my turn to make mine. And I chose freedom. The moment I decided to leave, it was like a switch flipped inside me. After everything I'd seen, Clara with her coworker, their little rendezvous at the hotel, I couldn't stay in that marriage any longer. I didn't even feel angry anymore, not in the way I had when I was pounding the steering wheel outside the hotel. No, this was something different, a cold, calm certainty. I was done. I didn't tell Clara right away. What was the point? Confronting her would have just led to more gaslighting, more excuses, more circular arguments that went nowhere. I'd already seen the truth with my own eyes, and no amount of her twisting the narrative could change that. Instead, I made a quiet plan, a way to slip out of her life as smoothly as she'd slipped into someone else's arms. Ben had planted the seed with his talk about the trailer on his property. At first, it sounded ridiculous. Me, living in a trailer. But the more I thought about it, the more it appealed to me. A clean break, a fresh start. No reminders of Clara's betrayal lurking around every corner. I hadn't even seen the place yet, but in my mind, it became a sanctuary, a way out of the mess I was in. The next day, I called Ben. He was as good as his word, offering me a deal on the trailer that was almost too good to be true. "Come take a look," he said. "If it feels right, it's yours." I drove out to his ranch a few days later, trying not to let my hopes get too high. But when I got there, I knew it was exactly what I needed. The trailer was simple but cozy, parked on a beautiful stretch of land near the foothills. There were trees everywhere, and the air smelled clean and fresh in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Ben showed me around, pointing out the hiking trails and the small cabin he used as his own retreat. "You can park the trailer here," he said, gesturing to a spot with a perfect view of the canyon. "It's quiet, peaceful. You'll like it." He was right. I did like it. More than that, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in months. Standing there, looking out over the canyons, I could almost imagine a life where Clara's betrayal didn't haunt me, a life where I could breathe again. I didn't waste any time. Over the next few weeks, while Clara was at work, I started quietly moving my things out of the apartment. I packed my clothes, my laptops, a few sentimental items, anything that was undeniably mine. I left the furniture and shared belongings behind. I didn't want to take anything that could tie me to her or our life together. It was about starting fresh, and I was determined to do it right. Every day, I made a little more progress, and every day, I felt a little lighter. Clara didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. She was still going on her work outings and coming home late. Once or twice, she asked if everything was okay, and I just nodded and changed the subject. I wasn't interested in her fake concern. The time for honesty between us had long passed. The final move came during one of Clara's business trips. She told me she'd be gone for a week, and I knew it was the perfect opportunity. I waited until she'd left for the airport, then spent the entire day packing up the last of my things and loading them into my truck. When I was done, I left a note on the kitchen table. It wasn't long or emotional, just a single sentence. I know everything. I hope he was worth it. Beside it, I placed my wedding ring. That was all I had left to give her. Driving away from that apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness for what we'd lost, anger at how easily she'd thrown it all away, but also a deep sense of relief. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't stuck in a cycle of suspicion and heartbreak. I was free. When I arrived at the trailer, Ben was there waiting for me. He'd helped set everything up, making sure the electricity and water were hooked up and that the place was ready for me to move in. "Welcome home," he said with a grin, handing me a cold beer. And for the first time in a long time, I actually felt like I was home. That first night in the trailer, I sat outside and watched the stars. The air was cool, and the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. It was so quiet, so peaceful, that it almost felt like I'd stepped into a different world. I thought about Clara, about the life we'd built, and the life we'd lost. But instead of feeling the crushing weight of betrayal, I felt hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, I could start over. And that was enough for me. The first few days in the canyons were surreal. For years, I'd been living in the chaos of city life. Early mornings, late nights, the constant hum of traffic. Now, there was nothing but silence. At first, it felt almost too quiet, like my thoughts were louder than they'd ever been. But as the days went on, that silence started to feel like a balm, soothing the parts of me that had been rubbed raw by Clara's betrayal. The trailer wasn't much, but it had everything I needed: a bed, a kitchenette, a small table where I could eat and think. It felt strange going from a spacious apartment filled with reminders of a failed marriage to this tiny space that was all mine. Strange, but freeing. Here, there were no photos of us smiling on vacation, no lingering scent of her perfume. Just me, my things, and the wide-open sky. The canyons themselves were breathtaking. I hadn't realized how much I needed nature until I was surrounded by it. Every morning, I'd step outside and take in the view. Rolling hills dotted with trees, the sun climbing higher with every passing minute. It was a stark contrast to the artificial glow of the city lights I'd grown used to. Here, the light felt real, warm, like it was wrapping itself around me and pulling me forward. Ben stopped by often in those first few weeks, always with a cheerful grin and a cold beer in hand. "How's the mountain man life treating you?" he'd ask, and I'd just laugh, still trying to adjust to this new reality. Ben wasn't just a friend, he was a lifeline. He introduced me to his family, a welcoming bunch who treated me like one of their own from the start. I don't know if he sensed how much I needed that connection, but I'll always be grateful for it. It wasn't long before I started exploring the trails Ben had mentioned. Hiking had never been my thing, but there was something therapeutic about walking through the canyons, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the sound of birds overhead. I'd walk for hours, letting my thoughts untangle themselves with each step. Sometimes I'd stop at a particularly beautiful spot, sit down, and just breathe. It was during one of those moments that I realized I hadn't thought about Clara in days, not in the bitter, angry way I had been. She was still there in the back of my mind, but her presence wasn't as sharp. The canyons were working their magic. One evening, as I sat outside the trailer with a cup of coffee, Ben came by and plopped down in the chair next to me. "You're looking better," he said, and I realized he was right. I felt better, stronger. The weight I'd been carrying for so long wasn't gone, but it felt lighter, more manageable. "It's the canyons," I told him. "They're saving me." Of course, healing wasn't a straight line. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, when the memories of Clara and that man outside the bar came rushing back like a wave. I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my fist clenched, my chest tight. But even on those nights, I knew I was in the right place. The anger would pass, the sadness would ebb, and by morning, I'd feel the sunlight on my face and remember why I'd left. One day, as I was working on fixing up the trailer, Ben's idea to keep my hands busy, I found an old sketchbook I'd packed in a rush. I hadn't sketched in it since college, but flipping through the pages brought back memories of who I used to be before life got so complicated. I decided to start sketching again, not about Clara or the pain she'd caused, but about the canyons, the people I'd met, the small victories of building a new life. It felt good to document my own survival in lines and shadows. The first time I ran into someone on the trails, I froze. It was a woman, dark hair pulled back, a kind smile that reached her eyes. She was replacing a flat tire on her bike and struggling with it. "Need a hand?" I asked, and before I knew it, we were talking. Her name was Maya, and she lived in a cabin not far from the canyons. She wasn't like Clara, no sharp edges or hidden agendas. Just honest, straightforward, and easy to be around. We exchanged numbers before parting ways, and for the first time since leaving Clara, I felt a flicker of something like hope. Moving into the canyons wasn't just a physical relocation. It was a mental shift, a reclaiming of my life. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. But every day, I felt like I was taking another step away from the man I'd been in that apartment. The man who stayed silent when he found a hidden phone, who tried to fix a marriage that was already broken. Out here, in the canyons, I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. And that was enough to keep me going. It didn't take long for Clara to notice I was gone. When she came home from her business trip and found the apartment nearly empty, my note and wedding ring sitting on the kitchen table, her first instinct was to bombard me with messages. At first, they were calm, almost polite. "Nate, where are you? Can we talk? Please call me. I don't know what's going on." I ignored them all, every text, every voicemail. I wasn't ready to face her, and honestly, I wasn't sure I ever wanted to. I had left everything I needed to say in that short note. I know everything. I hope he was worth it. What else was there to add? She knew what she had done, and I didn't owe her an explanation for leaving, not after everything. But Clara wasn't the type to give up easily. The messages became more frantic, her tone shifting from confusion to desperation. "Nate, please, we need to talk about this. I don't understand why you've left. Is this about us? I'm sorry if I've been distant. Let's work on it together." Then came the confession I'd been waiting for. It was almost laughable how she tried to downplay it. "Okay, I'll admit it. There was someone else. But it didn't mean anything, Nate. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please come home so we can talk about it." A mistake. She called months of lying, sneaking around, and betraying me a mistake. As if it were an accidental slip, something you could trip over and apologize for later. I could practically hear her trying to manipulate the narrative, framing it as a moment of weakness rather than the months of calculated deceit it truly was. The messages didn't stop there. She kept pushing, alternating between guilt-tripping me and begging for forgiveness. "You've been gone for days. I don't know how to fix this if you won't talk to me. Nate, I made a mistake, but it didn't mean I didn't love you. Please don't throw everything away." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at that one. She was asking me not to throw everything away, but she had done exactly that the moment she decided to betray me. It wasn't me who had destroyed our marriage, it was her. And now, after the damage was done, she expected me to pick up the pieces and pretend like nothing had happened. For weeks, I ignored her. I needed space, time to process everything without her voice in my ear muddying the waters. I blocked her number and stopped checking my old email. But that didn't stop her from finding other ways to get to me. Her mother started calling, leaving voicemails about how Clara is heartbroken and how you two should talk. Even some mutual friends reached out, though they didn't know the full story. I stayed silent. None of them had any idea what I had seen, what I had gone through. They only knew Clara's version, which I was sure painted her as the victim in all of this. Eventually, her messages shifted again. She stopped trying to justify her actions and started focusing on her pain. "I hate myself for what I did. I ruined everything. Please, Nate, let me make it right. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, and now you. Please just give me a chance to explain." Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that maybe she really was sorry. But the larger part of me, the part that had sat outside that hotel watching her walk in hand with another man, knew better. Her regret wasn't about me. It was about what she had lost. Her job, her image, her comfort. And now that everything was crumbling, she wanted me to be the safety net, to catch her fall. I wasn't interested in playing that role, not anymore. One night, as I sat outside the trailer under a sky full of stars, I read her latest message. It was longer than the others, a rambling mix of apology and desperation. She claimed that her life had spiraled after I left, that her affair partner had turned on her, and that she was now completely alone. "I never realized how much I loved you until you were gone," she wrote. "I will never forgive myself for what I did. Please just give me a chance to prove I can be better. I love you, Nate. I always will." For a moment, I felt a pang of something, pity maybe. She sounded so broken, so lost. But then I reminded myself that her pain didn't erase mine. Her remorse didn't undo the months of betrayal or the lies she had told. And her love? If it had been real, she never would have done what she did. I didn't respond to that message, just like I hadn't responded to the others. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Clara had made her choices, and I had made mine. I was building a new life, one that didn't include her. And no amount of pleading was going to change that. The day I ran into Clara was like being blindsided by a punch you never saw coming. By that point, I had settled into my life in the canyons. My days were calm, predictable even. I'd wake up early, go for a run, work on fixing up the trailer, and spend evenings staring at the stars with a quietness in my heart that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't fully healed, not by a long shot, but I was making progress. And then she showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I'd driven into town to pick up some groceries. The coffee shop I frequented had become a small ritual, a place to sit for a while, sip something warm, and use their Wi-Fi to handle work. That day was no different. I parked my truck, grabbed my laptop, and headed inside. The usual crowd was there, locals chatting, a couple of hikers passing through. It felt normal, safe. I had just finished my coffee and was stepping outside when I heard someone call my name. Nate. The voice was unmistakable. My stomach sank, and my heart felt like it skipped a beat. I turned slowly, almost dreading what I'd see. And there she was, Clara, standing across the street, waving like we were old friends who'd run into each other by chance. She looked different, or maybe it was just me seeing her differently. Her hair was pulled back in that way I used to love, and she was wearing a tank top and shorts. Her face lit up with a smile that didn't belong to someone who had wrecked my life. For a moment, I was frozen. Then she started walking toward me, and I realized I couldn't avoid her, not this time. As she got closer, I could see the hesitation in her step, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I've been looking for you," she said when she reached me, her voice soft. She sounded nervous, like she wasn't sure how I'd react. Honestly, I wasn't sure either. "What are you doing here, Clara?" I asked, my tone flat, my defenses already up. I just wanted to see you. To talk," she said. "Please, Nate. Just for a minute." I should have walked away. I wanted to. But something in me, curiosity, maybe, or the need for closure, kept me rooted to the spot. "Fine," I said. "Let's sit over there." I gestured to a bench near the corner, and we walked in silence. When we sat down, she looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning my face. "Happier. Healthier." "I am," I replied. It was the truth, and I wanted her to hear it. She nodded, her smile faltering. "I'm glad. You deserve that." There was a long pause, the kind that feels heavier than it should. Then she started talking. She told me about how everything had fallen apart after I left, how her affair partner had thrown her under the bus when their relationship became public at work, how she'd lost her job, her reputation, and eventually, him. "It was karma," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I deserved it." She looked at me then, her eyes glistening with tears. "Nate, I messed up. I know I did. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. Please, just give me a chance." Her words hit me like a wave, but instead of knocking me down, they just washed over me, leaving me standing there untouched. I wanted to feel something, anger, pity, maybe even the faintest spark of hope, but there was nothing. Just a quiet, steady calm. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice measured. "You made your choice, and I've made mine. There's nothing left to fix. We're done." She reached for my hand, her tears falling freely now. "Please, Nate. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'll do anything to prove to you that I've changed. I still love you." I pulled my hand away, gently but firmly. "You don't get to say that anymore. You threw everything we had away, and I can't unsee that. I can't unlive it. Love doesn't survive betrayal like that." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered sitting in my car outside that hotel, watching her walk into a life she chose over me. That memory was enough to steal my resolve. After a few minutes, she calmed down, wiping her face with trembling hands. I needed to see you, to tell you how sorry I am. And now you've said it," I replied, standing up. "Take care, Clara." She stayed seated, looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sorrow, regret, maybe even a hint of hope. But I didn't stick around to analyze it. I walked away, feeling lighter with every step. That encounter could have been a setback, a chance for old wounds to reopen. But instead, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I didn't hate Clara anymore. I didn't love her either. I just didn't care. And that, I realized, was the most freeing feeling of all. After that encounter with Clara, I knew I had reached the end of any lingering doubts or unresolved feelings. It was the closure I didn't realize I needed until I walked away from her sitting on that bench. For years, her betrayal had been a weight on my chest, but that day, I left the burden with her. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. In the days that followed, I replayed the conversation in my head, not out of regret, but to remind myself of how far I'd come. There was a time when I would have clung to any shred of hope she offered. But now, I saw it for what it was. Her trying to ease her own guilt, to make herself feel better. It had nothing to do with me and everything to do with her. The email came a week later, another long, emotional plea for reconciliation. She wrote about how lost she felt, how much she missed me, and how she believed we could start fresh. She wanted to meet again, this time to really talk and work through things. She even suggested we could move somewhere new together, away from the reminders of her mistakes. I stared at that email for a long time, my cursor hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her suggestions, to spell out in painful detail why there was no going back. But the wiser part of me knew better. Clara didn't need my anger, she needed my silence. A simple, direct response would say everything that needed to be said. So, I replied, Clara, there's nothing left to talk about. We've both moved on in our own ways. I wish you well, but I'm not interested in revisiting the past. Please respect that. Nate. I hit send and closed my laptop, feeling an odd sense of finality. That was it. No more texts, no more emails, no more pretending there was anything salvageable between us. Clara was part of my story, but she wasn't my future. She wasn't even my present anymore. A few days later, Ben stopped by the trailer with his usual grin and a six-pack of beer. You look like you've been thinking, he said, settling into the chair next to mine. I have, I admitted. Ran into Clara last week. Ben raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. How'd that go? Better than I expected, I said, taking a sip of my beer. She apologized, asked for another chance. And I told her no. I said it simply, without hesitation. Ben nodded, his grin widening. Good man, he said. Takes guts to do that. Most people would have let her back in, just to avoid the guilt. I thought about that for a moment. Maybe there had been guilt at some point, but not anymore. Not after everything I'd been through. I'm done with all of it, I said. She made her choices. Now, I'm making mine. Ben clinked his bottle against mine. To new beginnings, he said, and for the first time in years, the words didn't feel hollow. That night, as I sat outside under the stars, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't just about Clara or what she had done. It was about me, about reclaiming my life and choosing to focus on the things that mattered. The canyons, the friends I'd made, the simplicity of a life I'd built with my own two hands. Clara's email wasn't the last I heard from her. A month later, she sent another message, this time to tell me she was moving out of state for a new job. She wanted to meet one last time before she left, but I declined. What was the point? We'd already said everything that needed to be said. I wished her well in my reply and left it at that. Her final email was short, almost curt. Goodbye, Nate. I hope you find what you're looking for. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I already had. My happiness wasn't something Clara could take away or give back. It was mine, and I was finally learning how to hold on to it. These days, when I think about Clara, it's with a strange kind of detachment. She's a memory, a chapter in a book I finished reading. Sometimes I wonder if she's found what she was looking for, but those thoughts don't linger. My life is here now, in the canyons, surrounded by peace and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I chose myself. The final goodbye wasn't just to Clara. It was to the person I used to be, the man who ignored the signs, who clung to a broken marriage out of fear of starting over. That man is gone. And in his place is someone stronger, wiser, and far more content. And for that, I'll always be grateful. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and I found myself settling into a rhythm. Life in the canyons wasn't just peaceful, it was restorative. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birdsong and the sight of the sun creeping over the horizon. I'd go for a run along the trails, letting my thoughts untangle themselves with every step. The air was crisp, the kind that fills your lungs with a clarity you didn't realize you were missing. I spent my days working remotely, fixing up the trailer, and building connections with Ben and his family. They had a way of making me feel welcome without prying into the parts of my life I wasn't ready to share. Maya, the woman I'd met on the trails, became a regular part of my routine. We'd run into each other often, and slowly, a friendship began to form. She wasn't pushy, wasn't trying to fix me. She just listened, laughed at my bad jokes, and reminded me that there were still good people in the world. One day, after a particularly grueling run, I stopped at a clearing overlooking the canyons. The view was stunning. Trees stretching out as far as the eye could see, the sun casting golden light over everything. It hit me then. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not because of anyone else, but because I'd taken the time to rebuild myself from the ground up. That realization didn't erase the pain of the past, but it dulled its edges. Clara was still a part of my story, but she no longer defined it. Her betrayal was something I'd carry with me, but it didn't own me. It was just a chapter in a much larger book, one that I was finally learning how to design for myself. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting on what I'd been through. It wasn't easy to admit how blind I'd been or how much I'd ignored to keep the illusion of our marriage alive. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that ignoring the truth doesn't make it go away. It festers, grows, until it forces you to confront it in the most painful way possible. I realized that Clara's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had given me something invaluable: perspective. I saw now how easy it is to lose yourself in someone else, to let your happiness depend on their choices. It's a dangerous way to live, and it's a lesson I hope no one else has to learn the hard way. If you're reading this and you've been through something similar, let me tell you this: you're stronger than you think. The pain will feel unbearable at times, and the anger will threaten to consume you. But it will pass. You'll come out on the other side, scarred but wiser, and you'll realize that no one, not even someone you loved, has the power to define your worth. Life rebuilds. It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it rebuilds. And if you let it, it can even be beautiful again. I'm proof of that. I didn't think I'd ever be able to let go of the anger, the betrayal. But here I am, writing this from a place of peace. The canyons taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. So, if you're standing at the edge of heartbreak, wondering how you'll ever move forward, let me assure you, you will. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it will happen. One step at a time, one decision at a time, you'll rebuild. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the life you've created is better than the one you left behind. As for me, I'm not in any rush to make big changes. The trailer has become my sanctuary, and the simplicity of this life suits me. I still think about Clara from time to time, but those thoughts no longer carry the weight they once did. She's moved on, and so have I. These days, I focus on the things that matter: friendships, personal growth, and the small joys of everyday life. Whether it's a long run on the trails, a quiet evening under the stars, or a conversation with someone who truly sees me, I've learned to appreciate the moments that make life worth living. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. I've found my footing, my peace, and my strength. And if my story can help someone else find theirs, then every word I've written here has been worth it. So, here's to new beginnings and the courage to create them. You deserve it.